Hi, Future Ender here. I just wanted to give you a quick warning saying that the lighting in my clips in this video looks terrible, and I'm not going to reshoot this video because, it took a lot of time and I worked hard on it, so I'm just going to keep it as is, but it's looks really unnatural and really weird, so I'll make sure to get it fixed for the next video, but for this video it looks really weird and I guess we're just gonna need to live with it. On my channel, I feel like that I should review all of my favorite films, and one of those films is Back to the Future. So due to high request, I am going to review Back to the Future, and I'm not going to do this review alone. I am going to collaborate on this with my good friend Anthony, or you probably know him as Unique Frequency. So let's cut to the chase and talk about one of my all-time favorite films. Back to the Future stars Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Crispin Glover, Leah Thompson, and this film is directed by Robert Zemeckis. This review will contain spoilers to Back to the Future, so if you've never seen this film, then I would recommend skipping to this annotation to receive my spoiler-free thoughts on this film. But if you clicked on this review, then you probably have already seen Back to the Future, so let's just get on to the review.
Thank you for having me at Hellshapebox. I want to give my personal thoughts on the movie so that we can get it out of the way. My personal thoughts is that the whole movie, when it gets to dialogue, feels very quirky at moments. From, the starting point was great and all that, but I feel like when it gets to the dialogue, it gets a little quirky sometimes, and I get it that it was 1980s, and it was, the 80s were basically really quirky, and science fiction, it was starting to become more and more relevant.
Once we start this film, we enter the first act, which might be one of the best first acts in cinematic history. This first act foreshadows so much about this film. For example, we find out about the missing plutonium in the first 5 minutes of this film, and we also get various hints that the clock tower is the key to getting Marty back to the future, and we find some rather peculiar clocks in the house, one of them being a man hanging off of the arm of the clock, which is foreshadowing of a scene later on in the film. The conversations between George and Lorraine give us background knowledge on their youth and the events that occurred that caused them to fall in love and get married. None of this foreshadowing feels forced. All of this happens naturally between the dialogue between all of the characters in this film. This proves how excellent the writing is in this film. You find out the various character traits of all of our main characters within the first 30 minutes of this film. Our main protagonist, Marty McFly, is an individual who is kind of rebellious. He wants to seek a grander life, and he doesn't really respect his parents either. But on the other hand, George McFly is a man who is unable to stand up for himself, and he lets the people around him constantly push him around. George McFly lets his childhood bully, Biff, push him around even into adulthood, and his wife, Lorraine, is kind of an alcoholic bum, and Marty's siblings are just weird. Marty's home life isn't all that great, so to escape from that, Marty hangs out with a local scientist by the name of Dr. Emmett Brown. On one fateful day, Dr. Emmett Brown, or otherwise known as Doc, shows Marty his greatest invention ever, a time machine made out of a DeLorean. Doc shows off his groundbreaking invention to Marty, and he tests it on his dog, Einstein. At this moment in the film is where my favorite shot occurs. Once the DeLorean manages to reach up to the speed of 88 miles per hour, successfully sending Einstein 1 minute into the future, and you get to see the look of shock on Marty's face and the look of excitement on Doc's face. This here is just a classic moment. This is all achieved by the power of fantastic facial acting.
Now, here's one of the scenes where Doc Brown is controlling the DeLorean, and when he comes past towards them, at 88 miles per hour with the remote control, it feels so iconic to have the car line come straight at you almost if you're watching it in 3D. But if you're watching it regularly, it just looks like a normal green screen. And I actually kind of like the effect, but it feels very cheap, but only in that scene, and it feels so iconic that you're like, it's there. Everything about it is, everything from the DeLorean, the characters. I feel like that scene in particular just made the whole series a whole.
Though Doc is successful in inventing time travel, he is unfortunately murdered by Libyan terrorists.
Now, in the introduction of Back to the Future of Doc Brown, he he's that quirky scientist that mainly, he's the experimental guy, he's the scientist. But the one con about the mainly the whole Libyan thing, I didn't really know who they were until I searched them up, but you're gonna have to search that up yourself, really. That's something that I don't want to show. You just look for yourself.
What occurs is a high-stakes car chase. Marty hops in the DeLorean to try to outrun the terrorists, but the terrorists pull out a rocket launcher, and so Marty launches the DeLorean to 88 miles per hour. He successfully manages to outrun the terrorists, but he ends up in the year 1955, which kicks off the second act of this film. Once we enter the second act of this film and Marty manages to travel back to 1955, we can finally gawk at the amazing set design in this film. Yes, 1955 Hill Valley is a set. I just found this out recently. I always thought 1955 Hill Valley was a real town decked out to look like a town from the 1950s. But no, it was in fact a set. And that's not at all a bad thing. I mean, I legitimately thought that the set was a real town. So that proves how great the set design in this film is. And 1955 Hill Valley looks like a real town ripped straight out of the 1950s and then placed in this film. Marty manages to bump into his father, George, hanging out in a cafe. And, I mean, nothing has changed between the 1955 counterpart of George and the 1985 counterpart of George. I mean, the only difference between those two is age. And you already are starting to draw the comparisons between both counterparts in the first scene where you see 1955 George McFly.
The film does an incredible job for making you pity for George McFly. Marty is on a quest to find Doc Brown because he is the only one capable to send Marty back to the year 1985. Though Marty gets sidetracked once again because he also bumps into his mother, Lorraine.
While Marty was trying to get his father's attention, he managed to undo the very event that caused both of his parents to meet. Originally, Marty's grandfather was supposed to hit George with the car, but he hit Marty instead. Marty is not only trapped in a time period that isn't his, now he is in danger of not being born.
It brought the butterfly effect. Anything, if you crushed a butterfly, it would prevent something or happen. And it happens a lot, and From me, when I was younger and first watched it, I felt like all of these were just, simple, details. But then I saw like when Marty came in through the DeLorean, and he smashed up one of the trees, and now it's Lonely Pine Mall.
That seems like a really complicated plot, but this film manages to make it simple for your average film goer. That is why this film is so iconic. Casual film goers can enjoy it without being confused, and nerdy film goers like myself can deconstruct the hell out of it, but also enjoy the film just as much as the casual film goer. This is also just an incredibly fun film to watch. Watching Marty set his parents up is hilarious, and it's just very entertaining. Marty is trying to build the confidence in George so he could just go up to Lorraine and ask her out to the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, which is the very dance that Lorraine and George share their first kiss. If George and Lorraine do not share that kiss on the dance floor, Marty will be erased from existence. Let's just say the stakes are pretty high in this film. Another thing that this film masters perfectly is the chemistry between all the characters, whether that be Marty and George, Marty and Doc, or even Marty and Biff. The scenes with Marty and Lorraine are uncomfortable for all the right reasons. I know this might sound crazy to say, but the fact that Lorraine has a crush on Marty is actually believable. And I know this sounds crazy to say, but it doesn't feel forced at all. I mean, you totally buy that Lorraine would choose Marty over George. All the scenes with Marty and George are actually really heartwarming because Marty is teaching the various values that George will eventually teach Marty in the future. The Darth Vader scene in this film is also very iconic and very quotable. The biggest way this film impacted my life was actually this film inspired me to learn how to skateboard. The fact that Marty skateboarded inspired me to do the same, but I didn't grab onto the back of cars like he did. Speaking of skateboarding, one of the most memorable scenes in this film is the skateboard chase. Whether it be the iconic soundtrack or how it's just a really fun scene that always manages to thrill me every time I watch it. You know the part in this scene where Marty kicks back the tail of his board and he manages to create sparks? It is incredibly unrealistic, but it always manages to get me really pumped up. After all of this mayhem, Marty manages to get Biff to lose control of his car, and as a result of that, Biff wrecks his car and he crashes it into a manure truck.
Now, here's one thing that I don't get about Biff, is that I do not know how Biff gets away with everything that he does. From bullying Marty McFly's dad, or just McFly, he just picks on him. Like, I'm surprised no one hasn't like told him. He's always a loner kid. I know he's kind of a pushover when he gets bullied and all that, but it just doesn't make any sense how he can just get away with it. It's very childish.
After Marty's little stunt, Lorraine asks Marty out to the dance. On the night of the dance, we enter the scene in the car, or the conversation between Marty and Lorraine. And this scene is really uncomfortable to watch, but that is kind of the point of the scene. That is the message that the filmmakers were trying to get across. They wanted to show how screwed up this whole situation is. Once Biff enters the picture, it looks like all hope is lost, until George McFly comes to the rescue and he finally stands up to Biff. Biff is having none of this, so he decides to twist George's arm. He is about to break his arm until George finally musters up the courage and punches Biff square in the face, knocking him out. This is easily the most satisfying scene in this film, and this act finally completes George McFly's character arc in this film. The one character that went through the most substantial amount of character development is George McFly. Yes, the film is centered around Marty, and he does grow a little bit. I mean, he learns to respect his parents a bit more, but George is the one who goes on the whole character arc, and he learns to finally stand up for himself, and you go on that journey with him. So I believe you could make the argument saying that George McFly is the main character of this film. You go on this whole character arc with George, and you watch him grow. You watch him, as time go on, gain some more self-confidence, and because of that, it's so satisfying to watch him stand up to Biff and give him what he deserves. Now, since Marty has finally set his parents up, Marty can finally rock out on the stage and invent rock and roll, literally. I also love the little detail of how Chuck Berry kind of stole Johnny B. Goode from Marty McFly. I also love the idea how Marvin Berry makes a little cameo in this film, and that he tells his cousin Chuck about, the new sound you're looking for, and in simple terms that, well, Chuck Berry stole Johnny B. Goode from Marty McFly. I also love the part when Marty just starts soloing and he's getting really into it, and everybody around him seems really confused because they've never seen this before. They've never seen someone just go crazy and shred on the guitar, and because of that, they just look so horribly confused. I just love that little bit in this film. Now, since Marty doesn't have to worry about not being born, now his main concern is getting back to 1985. The clock tower scene is easily the most suspenseful scene in this film. It never fails to keep me on the edge of my seat. And I've seen this movie so many times that I've just lost count. It always manages to keep me on the edge of my seat. And you feel every ounce of sweat on Marty and Doc's face. The dialogue that Doc and Marty share in this scene is really heartbreaking to watch because you know that Doc will eventually get shot by the Libyans, and seeing his optimism about being able to travel time and him being all excited about his future, and you know that he will not live to see that. I mean, it's really heartbreaking to watch, even though I know what happens later, but still, it always manages to kind of tug at the heartstrings a bit. Doc finally manages to send Marty back to the year 1985, and now Marty has a bit of time on his hands and feels that he can warn him about his death, but the Libyans come and it's too late. It turns out that Doc is fine and that he was equipped with a bulletproof vest. This should really feel forced, but it doesn't. I mean, it is perfectly believable that Doc will eventually read the letter and see how time goes and then kind of put the puzzle pieces together and eventually come up with this solution. In simple terms, Doc's just a badass.
Back to the Future's ending is phenomenal. It feels really, really iconic. And it ties into, he actually saved some of the past, but, he kind of made some errors during the whole collision of traveling back in the past. I don't know why they then travel in the future, which says Back to the Future. But I feel like that the ending was probably the best part of it as well. Best ending. I feel like the cinematic, the ball, it's something that hasn't been done, but they did it so well that it it looks like it hasn't been done in such a long time.
This film ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. Doc, the next day, returns to Marty, telling him that he needs to go back with him to the future so he can prevent yet another catastrophe from happening. I mean, if Back to the Future Part 2 was never made, I would still be satisfied. This film stands on its own so well that I don't feel like that the sequels have to exist. I'm happy that they do, but this film really stands so well on its own that I feel like that the sequels don't really do as well. Back to the Future is just a classic film, and it is my personal favorite time travel film, and because of that, Back to the Future gets an A+.
Now, time for the rate. I rate this movie a 9 out of 10. It's a really good movie, but is it something really worth bringing to, I don't know, a party or some sort when, you have your friend that has probably every good movie like James Bond, not Back to the Future, but GoldenEye, and all the James Bond films, for example. But I give it a 9 out of 10 because it's a good movie. I love it personally. It feels really quirky at sometimes, but it's a masterpiece. But it's not in the fashion that everybody probably saw it, but it was still a good movie. Also, I hid something next to you, as a matter of fact. It's called Mission Impossible 2. I actually got it from the past when I was time traveling, as a matter of fact. And I hope that you might enjoy it and have a good time reviewing it. Again, thanks for having me. Besides, I gotta go back to the future. I hope to see you in the sequel. And stay safe.
I would suggest subscribing to my friend's channel, Unique Frequency. If you enjoy my videos, you will most definitely enjoy his. I'll leave his channel in the link below. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting the like button, and if you want more content like this, hit the subscribe button. And if you want to be notified every time I upload a video, hit the bell notification so you can be notified every time I upload a video. And shout out to Caveman and Emma Watson.